Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajim. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Elhamdülillahi Rabbil alemin. Vessalatu vesselamu ala Resulina Muhammedin ve ala alihi ve sahbihi ecma'in. Welcome back to our weekly webinar. Alhamdulillah, we are together again for another session. Just before Ramadan, we are going through the chapter on the Sahaba, but decided to switch to the chapter on fasting and about Ramadan, inshallah. This week, again, Colin Hojam is back with us, and Mustafa Hojam from North Carolina will be with us now reading. Inshallah, we want to start reading, and we have our also guest speakers. I strongly encourage them to join us to understand, to go through, to open up this special chapter, inshallah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. On fasting, meanings and messages from the month of Ramadan. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of Allah, the Merciful, the Compassionate. This treatise consists of 9 points, each of which explains some of the instances of wisdom in the month of Ramadan. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان. It was the month of Ramadan in which the Quran was bestowed from on high as a guidance unto men, and a self-evident proof of that guidance, and that as the standard to discern true from false. The fast of Ramadan is one of the 5 pillars of Islam and one of the faith's greatest signs or distinguishing features. There are numerous wise purposes in the Ramadan fast. These wisdoms pertain both to Allah's rububiyyah, dominicality, and to man's personal and social life. They are also linked to the training of the lower self, nafs, as tazkiyah, and to the gratitude felt for all of the bounties given by Allah. One of the many wise purposes of fasting in Ramadan is as follows. Before going on to the first wisdom, I want to ask a couple of questions to, inshallah, our speakers. First of all, in the ayah, it's talking about Ramadan being the month of Quran, and Quran a guidance to the man. So, and Ramadan being one of the 5 pillars of Islam and one of the faith's greatest signs or distinguishing features. So, first of all, I want to focus on this faith's greatest signs and distinguishing features. I guess this is the translation for sha'air, right? Can we say any few words about the sha'air? So what does the Ramadan signifies for us, and how come it's one of the sha'air? You know, when we say sha'air, most of the time we just go talk about maybe minarets, adhan, salam. So Ramadan is being one of the sha'air. First of all, what do we understand from sha'air, and how the Ramadan is one of the biggest one of them? Inshallah. Maybe we can start with Mustafa Abi, if he wants to step in and say a few words on this.
Sure. Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, I mean, the word shi'ar, or plural shi'air, rights or distinguishing features, signs, marks, tokens. There are lots of different translations. I think of it in this way. In one occasion, the Prophet ﷺ sends a group of soldiers on a tribe that had, been troubling the believers, and that were said to have left Islam. Right, so this tribe had become Muslim, and then there was some rumor that they had left Islam. So he sends them onto them, and he says, when you reach there, I understand they were going to reach close to Fajr, close to the morning prayer. He says, don't attack right away. Wait for Fajr, the prayer time, to come in. If you hear the adhan, if you hear the call to prayer, don't do anything. Just come back. They are believers. If you don't, then we have an issue with them. You can attack. So here, the adhan marks this community as a community of believers, as a community of Muslims. So there are things, practices, or objects that came to be associated with Islam in such a way that when you see that, you recognize that this person or this community is a Muslim community. Now, with regard to Ramadan, there's an interesting aspect to this, because if I'm fasting, nobody truly knows if I'm fasting or not other than God. However, aside, if you put that aspect of the reality of the fast aside, this month and the fasting in this month brings such changes to our lives that it's almost obvious that our lives are changing. This can be seen from outside. This can be observed and used as a testament to the Muslimness of this community, or the Muslimness of this person. And this becomes more clear when you are in a Muslim majority society. The entire life, the rhythm of entire life changes. But we can recognize it in our families and so on and so forth. So I think there's an indication here that suggests that we should try to make sure that when Ramadan comes, things are not as they were before. Things change. We recognize the sanctity and opportunity in this month and respond to it as due with those changes.
Thank you. And very interesting. I quote the verse again in the beginning. So it's talking about Quran, and it is also talking about the guidance as the standard to discern true from false. So when I first read the verse, just Ramadan and the relation with the Quran comes to my mind, but it also kind of emphasizes this sha'air concept in a way, as far as I understand. So the Quran came down as a guidance to the humanity, for the Muslims especially, and it kind of guides us towards those lifestyle which signifies our belief in a way. So maybe we can include the verse in that sha'air too, as the Quran being a guidance of this standard to discern true from false, in a way. Just as just the meaning it came to my mind, I wanted to share. And Colin Hocam, do you want to step in after a good break?
Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, it's nice to be back after a few weeks. What Mustafa just said was interesting. no one knows whether you're fasting or not. And apart from being one of the distinguishing marks or distinguishing signs of a Muslim believer, it's a distinguishing sign that can't be seen, but is known about. And the connection, I think, with the Quran being revealed in Ramadan and being a standard to discern truth from falsehood, the ma'yar, or the criterion, the Quran came to affirm Tawheed. And if we can take this idea of fasting as something which is not seen, as in a sense, a reflection of Tawheed, because when we pray, we do something. We stand and we genuflect and we prostrate. When we pay zakat, we do something. When we go on Hajj, we do something. When we make the shahada, which we should be doing consistently and constantly, in fact, not just once, we are doing something. But when we fast, we're not doing anything. And that is the point. We are abstaining. So in one sense, it's a negative worship in the sense that we're not doing anything, which is why it can't be seen. And that in itself is a reflection of the fact that as human beings, we are ajiz and faqir, we are impotent and we are impoverished and poor. We cannot act on our own. We cannot create anything. And everything that we have and we own is a reflection of the divine names. And Ramadan, in a sense, is the kind of apotheosis of Tawheed in every individual life. That's why it's special. No other faith, no other belief system has that. And I think that's why it's one of the greatest sha'ir. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very interesting that even people who has very limited knowledge of Islam, when they get to know you're Muslim or talking on Islam, they just jump on, oh, I know you have Ramadan. So apparently it's very appealing to everybody. It signifies a lot of meanings. In a Muslim majority country, of course, everything changed. Even you can see it on the social life, lifestyle. It's everywhere, and even for a non-Muslim looking from outside, it's a really significant worship, way of worship, which requires a severe dedication and some a great change in the lifestyle and everything, which could be even easily recognized from out. So inshallah, we'll try to open up a little more how significant is Ramadan. Any further reflection at this point?
Just one thing. As both you and Colonel Jan were speaking, this came to my mind. We all eat, we all drink, we all do things that are requirements of being human. And culture, I'm not talking about high culture, but culture, the way we live, evolves and develops around the things that we do on a normal basis, right? So it's because Ramadan and fasting changes many of these, not all, but many of these things that we do on a regular basis, just because we are human beings, right? There is a huge level of culture that evolves around it, right? So this is a natural thing, a natural consequence of these changes that God is commanding us to do or not to do in the month of Ramadan. And as a result, it becomes an unmistakable, right? An unmistakable sign of the community, because the whole way of life is changing. So there's great wisdom, right, in God commanding us to abstain from these basic necessities of life, transform our lives in a way that transforms the things that we take for granted in the most like basic, normal way in our lives. And by changing these things that we normally take for granted and do not even recognize, right? Like, I got up in the morning and had breakfast, and then had lunch, and then had dinner, or, I got thirsty and I drank water. Like, we do these things by, with a level of heedlessness built into our rhythm of life. But by changing these small things, tremendous consequences are accomplished in the way we live.
I find it's very interesting when you talk about, Mustafa Hoja, you talk about the culture which it accretes around, historically it's accreted around the practice of abstaining and fasting. The problem that we have with that, of course, culture brings neglectfulness, any kind of culture, because culture usually becomes sort of second nature and is unquestioned. And this is why, we have to stop after 30 days. It cannot become a habit. But even so, because it becomes part of the culture, it becomes more amenable to neglectfulness and neglectful ways of looking at it. And one of these is that, it's reduced often just to an issue of not eating and not drinking. Which is why the word fast is unfortunate here. And in this translation, there was a push to change the word fast to abstention. But it was thought that because fast has become part of the culture, then abstention really wouldn't, find favor with readers. So fast has been maintained. But it's not just about not eating and drinking. And I think that our culture is such that when people say Ramadan, that's what they think of. And that's unfortunate. But as you said, people have different levels of understanding and different levels of submission. And therefore, even if someone is just, not eating and drinking, as you say, it has actually huge benefits, both spiritually and practically, medically as well. So I'm not trying to criticize, but just pointing out that it can become just another sort of quotidian practice, like brushing your teeth. It can go to that level, actually. And I think we have to try to change that culture.
Interesting. Thank you. Inshallah, I want to go on to the first wisdom. One of the many wise purposes of fasting in Ramadan is as follows. Almighty Allah created the face of the earth in the form of a banquet table covered with bounties, each of them coming from whence he does not expect. Min haythu la yahtasib. In arranging this banquet, Allah expresses the perfection of His Lordship, His Rububiyyah, as well as His mercy and compassion. His Rububiyyah, His Rahmah and Rahimiyyah. Since we are enmeshed in a world of cause and effect and veiled by forgetfulness, the reality of the situation is often lost on us. During the month of Ramadan, however, the people of belief suddenly take on the stance and the manner of a well-organized army. As sunset approaches, they act as though they have been invited to the eternal monarch's feast, waiting patiently and worshipfully for the command, step forward and help yourselves. The mercy of their Lord is compassionate and universal, and they respond to it with worship that's orderly, elevated, and comprehensive. Do you think that those who do not worship in this way and who are unwilling to participate in such a feast deserve to be called human? So this was very interesting. The first wisdom, the first purpose, and the fasting started us reminding the Tawheed, actually. And as Kornajam just stated about the verse that we mentioned in the beginning, it is also talking about the Quran being the guidance, and Quran bringing us the message of Tawheed. So in this sense, when we think about also, we were reading this part with some other brothers before. One of the brothers very interestingly bring to our attention the sustenance, the banquet table, the varieties of the banquet table. So when we really think about it, as human beings, what we have, of course, the rizq is very appealing, and we run after the rizq from morning till night. But of course, it has a huge, a large spectrum. When we start from the very beginning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took us from non-existence and bring into the existence, and then he didn't leave us in a solid state, but it gave us life, right? And then he made us into human being, given a lot of different spiritual and feelings, different qualities. And then he bestowed on us iman and ihsan and ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So all these variety of ni'mah is actually requires kind of shukr, and all the steps we are going through in this journey is kind of a command, actually. Come to the existence in a way. We were waiting in a realm that is kind of not we can consider as wujud, maybe, and then he bring us to the wujud, and then he kind of commanded us to be alive, to bring us into life, and then he commanded us to be human beings, right? So kind of step by step, and he guided us to iman and Islam. So every single step, maybe we can also consider it as waiting for a command, and maybe the practice of fasting can remind us all these huge ni'mah or rizq, in a way, spiritual and material rizq at once. So while waiting for just the adhan at the time of breaking the fast, these all the lordship, or this banquet of existence, and different levels of existence can come to mind. It was very interesting that how we started with taking our attention or underlining the lordship, rububiyyah before everything, while talking about the fasting. It was very interesting to me. Maybe Mustafa Hojam or Colin Hocam can help us a little more if any of you want to step in and talk about the connection between the fasting and the rububiyya, or our ubudiyya facing the realm of rububiyya. Maybe we can talk about this part.
Yeah, I started last time. Let's hear from Colin Hocam this time.
He wanted help, and you're very good at helping, Mustafa. Actually, Baikar, you really hit the nail on the head, I think, there, because Ustad Nursi doesn't talk about a banquet table covered with foods. He talks about bounties, and you were enumerating the various things that we need for our sustenance, and that's not just our corporeal sustenance, just to keep us going. We need, like a car needs gas or petrol, as we say in the UK. The human body also needs sustenance, and food is the human being needs sustenance to continue existing. But that sustenance is not reducible to food and drink. And food and drink are basically symbols of sustenance, but they're only symbols of sustenance. They do not exhaust the kinds of sustenance, because, as you said, we need spiritual sustenance, we need intellectual sustenance, we need emotional sustenance, and of course we need corporeal or sustenance for our body. And food is just a symbol of this. That's all. So we can't reduce these bounties, and Ustad didn't do that. He didn't reduce the banquet table to just something which is covered with different foods. He said it's covered with bounties. And in fasting, we are exhorted to abstain from food and drink, because that is maybe the most obvious for us form of sustenance, because many forms of sustenance we can't sense, because many of them come from malakut. I mean, everything comes from malakut, but many come from malakut in a malakuti form, which we cannot sense with our 5 external senses. And so food and drink is a very convenient symbol of the sustenance for which we are supposed to be showing gratitude throughout the month of Ramadan, and of course beyond.
Mustafa, any words on this?
Yes, I'll try. I'll try to continue from where you and Colin Hocam started. Thinking about rububiyya and ubudiyya, as you mentioned, the lordship and servanthood, slavehood, as 2 categories that look to each other and that interact. That appears to be the, let's not say purpose, but wisdom in the creation of the human being. Like our presence in this existence becomes meaningful through this relationship, that we relate to our Lord, that we connect to our Lord. And one of the most obvious and most powerful ways of this connection is that he blesses us with his blessings, and we partake those blessings. We consume or observe or sense those blessings, and that fills us with gratitude. So God created us in a way, he like hardwired us in a way to have pleasure in the blessings, right? And the level of pleasure increases with the level of need. The more need we feel for something, when that need is fulfilled, the more pleasure taste we have from that. And that, for a person who is whose innate nature, fitra, is not corrupted, right? That should lead to more and more gratitude. And I think there is a connection here. I need to work it out more in my mind before I can articulate it better. But I think there's a connection here that Ustad Nursi seems to have had in mind with what we see in the second station of the 14th flash that comes after the first word in the words, where he talks about levels of mercy, and that connects to the concept of the manifestations of divine singularity, Hadiyya, and the manifestations of divine oneness, Wahidiyya, right? And if you think in that context too, Ustad suggests that the manifestations of divine singularity, which we can, since that's not the subject, I'm not going to go into detail, but which we can, understand as one of the ways we can understand is that things are not subsumed under general laws, but differentiated individually, specifically, in a way that makes them more beautiful. And in that beauty, there is a secret that helps the human being to recognize God's blessings, and through those blessings, His oneness and that connection that the human being has with God. So beauty in that sense is a gift from God. Beauty, meaning a force of attraction for the human being, right? Beauty in that sense is a gift from God to the human being, for the human being to recognize His blessings, and through His blessings, His lordship, right? Now, and the perception of that beauty increases with the need for that beauty. And the human being needs everything in existence, but the human being does not always have a recognition of, awareness of, right, his neediness for everything. This is, in a sense, Ramadan, in a sense, is an exercise to remind us of our neediness and need for all sorts of things, starting from the most basic, most corporeal, most immediate needs that can be recognized by everybody who has the basic animality of human existence, right? But that's just a starting point, because that's the trigger. We need to think of it as a trigger. And perhaps that's why Ramadan is more than fasting, as Kohen Hojam has been emphasizing, right? Ramadan is more than fasting. It is a whole change in the rhythm of life, where we try to associate further with the Quran. We try to associate further with our, the community of believers. We try to associate further with our families, and so on and so forth. So it's a whole package that is triggered with the basics, and we move on from there.
It's interesting that also the abstention, we also should abstain from having a sense of ownership over our own actions, over our own self, over our own so-called sovereign being. We are brought into this existence from nothing, and we own nothing. And we have this necessary fiction of owning a body and owning attributes and qualities, but none of them are ours. And so, again, this abstention, the fast, as you said, and that's the important point, Mustafa, is that everyone understands not eating and drinking. And that is a shorthand for sustenance, and sustenance in the most general definition that we can muster, because everything is sustenance. Everything that's given to us sustains us in some way. And we are to abstain from this fiction that we own things, that we control things, that we have power over things, because we don't. We own nothing. We control nothing. and we have power over nothing. And, you know, this is typified, and it's sort of, Ramadan is emblematic of this not owning, because we can't do anything without orders, you know. You can stand at your refrigerator 2 minutes before iftar, and everything is haram for you. You can only start eating or drinking when our Creator says so. And that itself is emblematic of our lack of ability, our lack of locus to make laws, our lack of the ability to set out criteria for ourselves. All of these are given. And Ramadan, as you say, is the whole package. And I like the issue of, you know, it's a trigger, basically. It should trigger a series of, how can I say, a series of reflections, maybe, a series of meditations on what it means to be human. And this question at the end of the first point, do you think that those who do not worship in this way deserve to be called human? And the answer is, of course not. Because it's not just about, you know, not fasting. It's about not expressing gratitude. Because it is all about, as you said, ubudiyya is about showing gratitude for Allah's names, for Him, to Him. And if we are not willing to do that, then we're really not justifying our existence. And we're not keeping our side of the bargain, our side of the amana, the trust. And we really are not deserving of the epithet human.
Thank you so much. So this I want to focus on a little bit on this last sentence that kind of wraps up the whole concept. Kind of we are responding to that realm of rububiyya with ubudiyya, and universal ubudiyya, is to put it in words, o şefkatli, haşmetli, külliyetli rahmaniyete karşı üs'atli ve azametli ve intizamlı ve ubudiyetle mukabele. So on the face of this compassionate and universal mercy of our Lord, we respond with an orderly, elevated, and comprehensive worship. I want to just share very quickly, apart from the chapter on, Shukr. It's just a couple of chapters before the Ramadan part. For if the universe is observed carefully, it is seen from the way it's arranged that everything results in thanks. Each looks to thanks to an extent and is turned towards it. So most of the time, it's very interesting. You know, we encourage each other to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and bring it to our lives, to be thankful all the time. But Ustad kind of put it here, started with a statement saying that thanks is all about life. You know, it's all about the existence. The creation is already set up on this. Just maybe we should be conscious of that. So it is a very interesting statement to me, because it's kind of little different than how we practice it in our lives. It is as though thanks is the most important fruit of the tree of creation. So it's a natural result. It is the fruit, the end product of the creation. And gratitude is the most elevated product of the factor of the universe. The reason for this is as follows. We see in the creation of the world that its beings are arranged as though in a circle with life as its central point. Life as its central point. All beings look to life and serve life and produce the necessities of life. That's to say, the one who created the universe chose life from it, given it preference. Even Tawheed in the universe of the Kasra, of multiplicity, becomes apparent through life. So life is stated in the center. Then we see that he created the world of living beings in the form of a circle and placed man, human being, at its center. He created the world of living beings in the form of a circle and placed man at its center. Simply, he centered the aims intended from animate beings on man, gathering all living creatures around him and subjugating them to him. He made them serve him and him dominant over them. That's to say, the glorious Creator chose man from among living beings and willed and decreed this position for him in the world. This is very interesting because, most of the thinkers we're defining the human being as a talking animal, a social animal, a thinking animal, but not much different than an animal. But here we can see that he was given a special position for a purpose. There should be a purpose behind it. Otherwise, what's the difference between him and all the other living beings? Then we see that the world of man and the animal world too are disposed like circles with sustenance placed at their center. He has made mankind and the animals enamored of sustenance, has subjugated them to it, and made them serve it. What rules them is sustenance. And he has made sustenance such this is also very interesting. For example, we have like huge trees, right, which are like living beings, simply, and they feed like thousands of fruits, which are like their offsprings, but they just put their root and on the earth and just get their sustenance from there. But when we look at our lives, it's really interesting. We run from morning till night just for that risk. So it's kind of in the center of our lives. And when you say bread money, everything else is kind of secondary, besides it. It's the excuse for anything. And, we do everything from morning till night just for making that bread money. And it's for a purpose, interestingly, in the center of our lives. We could, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have fed us in many different ways, in very simple ways. But interestingly, we are running for that risk from morning till night. And he has made the sustenance such a vast, rich treasury that it embraces all his innumerable bounties. Even with the faculty called the sense of taste, he has placed on the tongue sensitive scales to the number of foods so that they can recognize the tastes of the many varieties of sustenance. That is to say, the strangest, richest, most wonderful, most agreeable, most comprehensive, and most marvelous truth in the universe lies in sustenance. Mustafa Hocam was talking about the beauty, the varieties of beauty is also so many, right? Even we can call it tastes beautiful, right? So, for example, just talking about this food, we just have a piece of flesh in our mouth, but it can differentiate really any kind of taste on the world, right? On the other side, we see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala feeds huge animals like a whale, like an elephant, or a bull or cow, right? With just a simple grass. But for the human being, for a special purpose, he gave that ability. We can differentiate millions of different varieties of risk from each other. Just if we can talk about, of course, in other areas, but if we just talk about food, even the food takes a huge amount of our times. You can see TV programs, you can see like on how to cook or where to go for such a food, etc., etc. So why this is so rich, right? It's just open in front of us. In a way, this natural way of life, life is all looking to the shukr, but Allah, in a way encourages us in special ways even to fulfill this duty. That was my understanding. I don't know if you want to reflect upon this little bit, because I found it very interesting, while reading in the Ramadan Risala about shukr. I wanted to check the Risala on the shukr, and there was a great connection how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with his rububiyyah, set up this life surrounding around shukr. Now we see that just everything has been gathered around sustenance and looks to it. So does sustenance in all its varieties subsist through thanks, both material and immaterial, and that offered by word and by state. It exists through thanks, it produces thanks, it shows thanks. For appetite and desire for sustenance are a sort of innate or instinctive thanks. So showing appetite, enjoyment towards a food, even it's a natural way of offering thanks. Enjoyment and pleasure also are a sort of unconscious thanks offered by all animals. It is only man who changes the nature of that innate thanks through misguidance and unbelief. He deviates from thanks and associates partners with Allah. Sorry, it was a long reading, but
Michael,
yes.
There are levels of in'am, right? Act of blessing or act of bestowal, and one level is associated with oneness or rahmaniyya, mercifulness, and that is universal to all. There's another level that's associated with rahimiyya or ahadiyya, and that is specified. The specifications are more relevant to the human being among other living creatures, because as you mentioned, I think that was a beautiful example, like the huge whales just eat one thing. They feed on krills, or huge elephants, feed on a particular type of leaf, and so on and so forth. Whereas the human being is created in a way to recognize, sense, and differentiated varieties of beauties. This, however, can also it is also a test, in the sense that the human being can lose himself or herself in the pursuit of these beauties and these pleasures, and forget the blesser behind the act of blessing, or even not recognize the act of blessing behind the blessing itself. So again, we're coming back to Ramadan, the command of stop, right? Stop consuming all of these things. Stop consuming food, stop sleeping, so long at night. Stop being heedless of my message and turn, to my message and read the Quran more in this month, and so on and so forth, right? This, bringing everything to a halt, right, is a very powerful blessing in and of itself to recalibrate the innate human nature, the fitra, the human being, to his fitra, which is primarily about ubudiyya, and which, as a result, which is primarily about gratitude. Because when we do not attribute the blessing to the blesser, when we do not recognize the giver of beauty behind all these beauties, right, we are falling away from our fitra, and as Kolin Hocam emphasized, losing our very essence in terms of being a human being, right? We are losing our we are losing our, in a sense, God-given blessing of being a human being.
Thank you. Any further reflection at this point, Kolin Hocam?
Not really, just to echo that, our humanity lies in our disavowal of ownership and our connection to Allah. And if that connection is not affirmed and is not acknowledged, then we don't deserve to be called human, because our humanity is contingent upon our ubudiyya. And if we avoid ubudiyya, if we consciously move away from it, then what are we? We're a chimera in a sense. We're some strange creature who is animalistic in turn, and has the ability to be human, but doesn't want to be human, doesn't want to be grateful, and yet doesn't have the innocence of animals. Inhuman, something strange and unearthly, but not human, definitely not human. What does it mean? We see, through the mute eloquence of animals, their gratitude. They do what they're created to do, and it could be argued that they have really not much control over that, but that's not the point. They're there for us to learn from. We are here to forge this connection, or to acknowledge this connection, because the connection is already forged, to acknowledge our connection with the Creator. And if we avoid that, it says in Quran, to avoid dhikr is a crime. Those who consciously avoid dhikr, and I'm not talking about a Sufi ritual here, I'm talking about acknowledging Allah's signs, names, attributes, all of those things. They are criminals. So it's that important, and lack of gratitude leads to kufr very, very quickly, and therefore we lose our humanity if we avoid this knowingly. So this question is a very opposite question that Ustad is asking, and there are some people who said, well, just because we're not fasting, does that mean we're not human? No, it's nothing to do with fasting, actually. Ustad is saying, do you think that those who do not worship in this way, in other words, worship that is orderly, elevated, and comprehensive, and a response to divine mercy, if we don't do that, and that obviously is abject ingratitude, then no, we don't deserve to be called human.
So in a way, all the creation under the Rububiyyah is kind of giving thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and as the supervisor, the human being has the given all these abilities, different senses and qualities, has the responsibility to offer it by conscience, but he's absent, he's not there. But under Ramadan, kind of, we are coming back to the first row of that well-disciplined army, in a way.
Yeah, we're rehumanizing ourselves, maybe.
Thank you so much. We have very little time, but I just want to maybe give a first read to the second point. Maybe we can, come back to discuss over it later on. One of the many wise purposes behind fasting in Ramadan concerns humankind's thankfulness for Allah's bounties and is as follows. As explained in the first word, a price must be paid for the food that the servants bring on trays from the royal kitchen. How foolish it would be then if we were to give the waiter a tip while ignoring the one who sent them in the first place and dismissing those priceless bounties as worthless. Almighty Allah has scattered countless bounties across the face of the earth for mankind, and in return, He requires us to pay for them with our gratitude. The apparent causes behind those bounties are nothing more than servants or tray bearers. We are to an extent indebted to those servants, and we pay them a price accordingly, showing them great respect and gratitude that in actual fact they do not merit. The true bestower of bounties is infinitely more deserving of thanks than are those causes, which are simply the means whereby those bounties are delivered. To thank Him, then, is to recognize that those bounties come from Him directly. To thank Him is to appreciate their worth and to acknowledge our own need for them. To thank Him, then, is to recognize that those bounties come from Him directly. To thank Him is to appreciate their worth and to acknowledge our own need for them. Fasting in Ramadan is thus the key to true, sincere, comprehensive, and universal gratitude. This is because at other times of the year, most people who are relatively well off do not realize the value of the bounties they receive, since they do not experience real hunger or true need. Those whose stomachs are full, especially if they are rich, do not understand the bounty there is in a single piece of dry bread. When the time to break the fast arrives, however, a believer's taste buds testify that dry bread is one of Allah's most precious and valuable bounties. During Ramadan, everyone, from the king to beggar, expresses a kind of gratitude through understanding the true worth of those bounties. I want to stop here. We're at the end of the time. Any short reflection up to here that before we closing, inshallah. Mustafa abi,
No, I'm good. Word. I'm good. I'm happy. A blessed, happy, grateful Ramadan to everybody, inshallah. Inshallah.
Alhamdulillah, it is back after a year. Ramadan. Colin abi, inshallah, any closing remarks?
No, just Ramadan Kareem to everyone.
Thank you so much. Mustafa, you want to make a short dua, Ramadan? Inshallah.
No, you make it.
Okay.
You make it.
سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. May Allah open our hearts to the Quran in the month that it was revealed, and inshallah open our souls and hearts for all those spiritual faith in this blessed month. Al-Fatiha.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Ramadan Mubarak.